Okay, the following video interviews are part of the United States Marine Corps Vietnam Tanker History Project and were recorded at the VTA reunion in Washington, D.C. on October 30th, 2013. Give us your story. Full name, rank, and sailor, right?
Yeah, close. Bob Vaxter, Robert officially. In Nam, I was Lurch. At 6'4", I don't know how I got that nickname, when the average tanker is 5'8". But anyway, I joined the Marine Corps in 1967, was a Hollywood Marine. Went from boot camp to ITR, the usual trail. Tank school at Del Mar. After tank school, staging, and then to Okinawa, and then to Vietnam in early February 1968. I was fortunate enough to miss the nastiest part of Tet.
But you were fortunate enough to get involved in the rest of Tet, unfortunately.
Pretty much, yeah. That would be a concise way of saying that. I tell the story. I said that we were circling Da Nang in probably was, I want to say about the 18th of February, 68. When at that time they were referred to as stewardesses came on and advised us we could not land because the Da Nang airport was taking incoming.
And incoming is?
Well, at this point, I believe they were taking mortars. What size, I have no idea. And I thought to myself, I haven't even gotten to Vietnam yet, and someone's trying to kill me. This is going to be a long year. Well, we landed there eventually. It was too late in the day for the clerks to process us because they got off work in a half an hour. And so we went to the transit area, which consisted of about 15 of the wooden-sided, metal-roofed buildings that were mosquito-screened the upper half. And I noticed next to each one of these buildings was a sandbag bunker. I thought, that's good. Because it turned out that night, the base took incoming, and while a bunch of us were hiding in the bunker, because we were FNGs and didn't know anything else to do, one of the huts 2 down from us took a direct hit and blown to nothing. Fortunately, nobody injured. I got up the next morning, I'm thinking, I've been here not even a day. They tried to kill me twice. This is all very personal, you see. The fact that I just happened to be in the way has nothing to do with anything. Anyway, we were processed, put on some kind of airplane, a Caribou, I forget what the designation is, sent to a place called Phu Bai, which was the 3rd Tank Battalion rear at that time. We got in there just in time to go to lunch because it was 11:45 and the clerk was taking his lunch hour break. We came back, they had us line up. There was, I think, a dozen tankers. And he went down the line, 1st tanks, 3rd tanks, 5th tanks, 1st tanks, 3rd tanks, 5th tanks. That's how I ended up in 3rd tanks. And then we separated from that, and it was Alpha Bravo Charlie. Alpha Bravo Charlie for which company you went to, and that's how I ended up in Charlie tanks. 5 of us got on the airplane after we collected our flak jackets, helmets, a .45 pistol, a shoulder holster, and 3 magazines, and no ammunition. We flew to Dang Ha. We got there about 5 o'clock in the evening. We were put on a 6-by, the last one leaving the compound prior to the gate being shut for the night. And we made it to Quang Tri as they were getting ready to close the gate at Quang Tri. We got there at that time, if memory serves me, there were the Seabees building the airstrip and the control tower, 1 company of infantry guarding the place, and 5 tents belonging to the Charlie Company, and that was the rear. And that was Quang Tri.
And now, not to interrupt you, Vax, but you've mentioned places like Quang Tri, Dong Ha, Phu Bai. Now, in the old Republic of Vietnam, there was a separation between the communist North Vietnam and South Vietnam. That was called the demilitarized zone. And that was the area that you were facing directly at the enemy. Are those places not where I'm describing?
They're, in relation to the whole country, they are only slightly south of the demilitarized zone. Mileage-wise, I think Quang Tri is probably 40, 50 miles south of there. Dong Ha, maybe 35 to 40 miles. Phu Bai, maybe 100.
And that is away from the demilitarized zone.
Correct, heading south, with
And
Phu
those
Bai being the farthest away.
And those were the areas that you referred to as the rear area.
Yes. For my purposes, that was the rear.
But in reality, when we look at the country of the former Republic of Vietnam, they were the front.
Well, if you would say,
Right.
I guess without fear of contradiction, that there were really no rear areas. Every place you went got shot, bombed, mortared, strafed, attacked, whatever.
And the area that was defined as the area of tactical operation for United States Marines, which was members of the, and where tanks concerned, would be 1st, 5th, and 3rd Battalion tanks. That was referred to as the I Corps.
Correct.
Okay, so the I
And that's
Corps,
because in Roman numerals, the 1 looks like an I.
yeah, that's right. And that spread from the DMZ out to the coast
Right.
and over to the Laotian Cambodian border.
Correct. You know your history. Yeah. Anyway, to carry on, got up the next and unfortunately, I do not remember the gunnery sergeant's name who was there. He told us to throw our gear into the 3rd tent in line. There were 5 16-man tents. One was for supply, one was for, and the 3rd one was sleeping area. We walked in there, the one side wall of the tent, which was facing probably approximately north, maybe northeast. It looked like a green piece of Swiss cheese. There probably were 50 holes if there was one. And there was a guy laying on a bunk, and he told us, just throw your gear on any empty cot. And I think Tom Freeman may have asked him what the holes, why the holes? And he said, oh, the NVA set up a machine gun last night on the railroad tracks that ran from Dong Ha to Quang Tri and shot up the place.
Well, let me ask you something. NVA, NVC. People hear a lot of those words. You know, they also hear the word Charlie and Mr. Charles. Mr. Charles denoting more respect because he is better trained. NVA, VC. Would you please explain to me what those initials
NVA, basically the initials for the North Vietnamese Army, the VC, or Victor Charlie, were the rebels, if you want to call them that.
Insurgents.
Insurgents, yeah. They were the unpaid actors, so to speak, in the drama. But they were supported by and influenced by and supplied by the North Vietnamese and indirectly the communists.
And those would be the communists of the former Soviet Union and China.
Correct.
Very well.
Anyway, so here I am, in this tent that's been shot up, and I'm thinking to myself, they tried to shoot me when I landed. They tried to blow me up my first night. We missed it in Phu Bai, and now we're in Quang Tri, and they just shot this place up the night before. Again, I'm thinking, this is going to be a long tour. Basically, we got there and we had nothing to do. The Marine Corps had sent all these extra tankers over because right at the start of Tet, they took a lot of casualties. As it turned out, a lot of the casualties were of a non-serious nature. And so the guys who were wounded were back in service within several days, and so they didn't need us at that point. There were 5 of us. There was myself, Donald Bell, Nick Appa, Tom Freeman, and Ernie Perez. We were assigned to Cap Unit Papa 24, which was closer to Dong Ha than Quang Tri, but relatively halfway between.
Now, you said Papa 24?
That was the designation for the Cap Unit, Combined Action Platoons.
And the Papa 24, what did 24 stand for?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Normally it would stand for 2nd Battalion, 4th.
Yeah, probably something. But anyway, so we were temporarily assigned to them. And basically what we did for about a month and a half was at night, so some of their people could get a whole night's sleep. Some of the tankers would go out on the night ambushes. In the mornings, for the guys who were on the night ambushes, so some of them could get some sleep, the rest of us would go out and run the morning patrols and search patterns with the corpsmen.
So what you're saying, as I understand it, is you weren't doing road sweeps or anything in a tank, you were doing infantry duties.
Correct.
Which is the basic what Marines do.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's automatically assumed that if you're a Marine and you graduated from boot camp, and at that time ITR, you understood basic infantry tactics.
You were a basic infantryman.
Yes. And yours truly, being the short, stubby guy that I am, became the radio operator for the morning platoon road patrols.
So you became a target.
Yeah, and as military humor goes, when I became the proud possessor of the PRC-25, they handed me the 15-foot whip antenna, which is a flat piece of metal that folds. And they were unfolding it for me. And I said, no. I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. And we'll fold that right back down because I'm not having a 15-foot target on top of my shoulders. And so basically for a month and a half, the 5 tankers were infantry assigned to a cap unit. We'd go into the villages between Dong Ha and Quang Tri with the corpsman. He would perform medical chores.
On who, Bob?
On the South Vietnamese peasants who lived in the villages.
The citizens of the Republic.
Yeah, in other words, if the baby had the whooping cough, the corpsman would give him medication to cure. If somebody cut themselves, he would clean the wound and take care of it. If somebody hurt themselves, broke a leg or whatever, the corpsman would be there. He would render medical aid and assistance to the villagers. And the idea behind it was, of course, if he sees the Marines or basically Americans performing help for the local people, then the local people help the Marines. And it worked out, and it did work out.
That was what they called a CAP unit, which stood for Civic Actions Program, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And basically what the Marines who were trained as CAP men did was train what were called the popular forces, or we'd call them the inactive reserves in this country. They taught them small arms and small arms tactics and squad units and things so they could defend themselves. And again, that works really well. But of course, political statement here. General Westmoreland didn't like it, so they discontinued it in 1969, I believe.
It's not a political statement, it's a fact.
Yeah, but so we did that around April the 1st, April the 3rd, somewhere in there. We were recalled to Quang Tri because Operation Pegasus, which was the operation to relieve Quezon from the siege, started. That involved Army and Marines and Marine Corps tanks.
Let me interrupt you for a minute on that. Operation Pegasus, the operation to relieve the besieged base at Khe Sanh. Now, as I understand it, when Tet started, General Yap poured about 5 NVA divisions into the area surrounding the fire base at Khe Sanh. And we had the 26th Marine Regiment reinforced, I believe, by a company of the 9th Marines.
And there were also, and I don't recall the Army units that were there,
Right.
along with South Vietnamese regular soldiers and airborne units.
And what he did was he began to close in on the fire base and took the village of Khe Sanh and then the Special Forces encampment at Long Vinh.
Long Vinh, I believe, yes.
Yeah, I think it was Long Vinh.
Long Vinh. You were close. You were close.
Might be
You had the long part, right?
And that was a 3-month siege in which Marines held their ground,
Right.
tying up those units while the rest of Vietnam was afire. And the good news was that we had so much going on up there with support from our brothers in the Air Force and Marine and Navy fighters and what have you, that they weren't able to pull those units into the battle away.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, that was my understanding anyway,
that's my
what you just
understanding as well.
explained.
That entire operation came under the design of the North Vietnamese commanding general Yap, who defeated the French Foreign Legion, a very elite fighting force, at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu.
Yeah.
So you're getting ready to go off on Pegasus. It's a
Well, they pulled us out of the cap unit. We went back to Quang Tri, and basically we were on standby as replacements for casualties from Operation Pegasus. They didn't have as close to the number of casualties people in Washington D.C. expected, so we kind of slowly filtered our way into the units. And basically, when maybe if someone was wounded, or they rotated to R&R, or they just rotated home. And approximately April 18th, I believe, 17th, somewhere in there, yours truly was put on a convoy, rode the back of a 6x up to a place called Bridge 3-4, which was about 7 to 10 miles outside of Khe Sanh, at the base of one of the mountains. And at that time I was temporarily assigned as like a 5th man on one of the tanks, because one of the guys had only about 4 or 5 more days to go and he was going home. And so obviously if I'm there, I'm all learning the ropes. So when he leaves, there's a seamless transition from one to the other. So I end up at a place called LZ Hawk, about 3 miles as the crow flies from Khe Sanh. We could stand at the LZ and see Khe Sanh, but it was a half-hour ride by tank to get there, which comes into play later on in my illustrious career as a hero. And
up to your grenade pins.
Yeah, the 19th of April, no, 25th of April, excuse me, to me is a very big day. Somebody in Da Nang, and I'm sure at least a colonel, if not higher, hit upon the bright idea of taking tanks at night. And we all know, even civilians know, that tanks are really a stealth vehicle. You can't hear them for more than 5 miles. You get beyond 5 miles, you can't hear them. So
that's right.
You make sure the bad guys are always more than 5 miles from you. We know how that works. Anyway, he got the bright idea of running what were commonly referred to back then as rat patrols at night. A squad or 2 squads of infantry would go out of LZ Hawk and down the mountain on basically a typical South Vietnamese 12-foot wide road involving multiple switchbacks to the Bridge 3-4 at the bottom of the mountain. allegedly to keep the NVA or the VC from mining the road. Apparently it worked really well down in southern I-Corps around Da Nang where the country was flat.
Yes.
3rd Platoon Commander at that time, 1st Lieutenant Dave Ralston, took the first tank out the night that we were ordered to do that kind of silly stuff. And his unit, he made it down the mountain. Of course, nobody knew they were coming. And I think that was included both the NVA, the VC, and the guys at Bridge 3-4.
Let me ask you something, not to interrupt you, but we realize that by today's standards, some people might not think that's bad because of night vision capabilities.
Yeah.
But in Vietnam, you guys had starlight scopes, but you probably didn't have one on a tank.
No, starlight scopes, at least as I recall, were limited to rear areas like the Da Nang Air Base, or someplace where they can sit in towers and observe a foliage-free area so you could see things. No, we had our night vision involved making sure the headlights were not turned on in the tank, and hopefully there was a lot of moonlight and starlight.
You did have some infrared capabilities.
No.
Okay.
So anyway, April 25th, the second night for these rat patrols. And that was the name we gave them.
And there were no streetlights.
And the clock, at this point in time, I've been assigned as the driver for Charlie 3-1, tank TC'd by a gentleman by the name of Darrell Clock. It was our in the rotation, we were going out that night. Depending on how you want to look at it, either good luck, bad luck, or fate, we didn't go out because we had no brakes. And you can't really go down a mountain in a 52-ton vehicle without brakes. So a gentleman by the name of Gary Hall, who had Bravo, for Bravo Company, I believe 3-3 or 3-2, I don't remember anymore.
Bravo Company, 3rd.
But yeah, that's in a military idea, that's a humorous thing, because Gary was in Charlie Company, tank commander with his tank. At some point in time in late March, Bravo Company became short of tanks that were operational. So Gary Hall and his crew and his tank were transferred temporarily to Bravo Company. Sometime at the end of Pegasus, in the middle of April, Charlie Company was short operational tanks. So Gary was transferred back from Bravo Company, temporarily reassigned to Charlie Company, the company he is permanently assigned to. He became temporarily assigned to them. Well, the luck of the draw is Gary's tank got the rat patrol that night. They took, I can't remember the exact number, but I would say probably 12 infantrymen, and I want to say from 2-3.
2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines.
Correct. With them, and they would provide security for the tank. Some walking in front, but pretty much mostly riding on the back of the tank or the sides. They made it maybe a mile, maybe a little more down the mountain, and there was a hairpin turn to the left, and then about 50 yards, another hairpin turn to the right. As they started into the the exact opposite, they just were coming out of the hairpin turn to the right to go down the mountain and get the other turn. When the NVA, which would have been the left-hand side of the tank going down the mountain. Now you have to understand, the road is 12 feet wide. The tank is 11 feet 11 inches wide, so there's not a lot of play there. So the tank basically, and the driver is going to keep almost scrape the left-hand side of the tank going down the mountain. He's going to keep scraping it against the side of it because he's only got an inch to play with.
And if he's a blade tank, he has less than that.
Yeah, and it's at night. So obviously he doesn't have his headlights on. Well, as they went around the hairpin turn and were starting to do this, the NVA stood up and threw a satchel charge at the tank.
A satchel charge. Could you explain why that is?
Basically a canvas bag full of explosives with some kind of timer or fuse. Generally speaking, it was a fuse, which the person throwing the bag, and the bag probably weighed 5 pounds. With explosive, lots of explosive in 5 pounds. You would pull this fuse, it was good for 15, maybe 20 seconds, my understanding, and you threw it at the object you wanted to destroy. And apparently when the gentleman from the NVA threw his satchel charge, he missed the tank. It went over the back end of the across where the grunts were sitting, and they watched it fly over them. At that time, as they always like to say in the movies, all hell broke loose. They were getting fired on from the same location approximately that the satchel charge came from. An RPG bounced off the tank. Another satchel charge or RPG, no one is really sure, was either shot at the tank or thrown at the tank. And on the front of the tank where the main gun is at, there's what's called a gun shield. And it's flexible to allow the gun to move up, down, sideways. Whether either the RPG or whatever it was hit the gun shield and exploded, and because of the angle it hit at, the entire blast went straight down into the driver's compartment, instantly killing the driver, a man by the name of Jimmy Janes, or James Janes if you want to be technical. So when he's killed instantly, the tank stopped. Well, the tank is still in the kill zone. They're being shot at with machine guns, rifles, hand grenades, you name it. The NVA's obviously wanting to destroy the tank. And where it's at, if they destroy the tank, until you are able to move it, the entire road is blocked indefinitely. No supplies up, no supplies down. About that time, several of the grunts were hit. A gentleman by the name of Gil Hernandez was hit approximately 15 times, and he still continued to fight. The tank began to move again. Of course, the grunts have now gotten off the tank, and they're on the shoulder, and they're fighting. The tank began to move again, and Gary Hall thinking that the driver's in command. Well, what happened is his foot's no longer on the brake or whatever, and so now the tank is, with its momentum downhill, is creeping. Well, when Gary realized, he said when they realized that the tank was not turning, it was going straight, he communicated with the loader and the gunner to hang on, and over the side of the mountain they went, approximately 45, 50 feet down into a ravine. Of course, the tank hits nose first into the ravine, and apparently now either Jimmy's foot is on the gas pedal or just momentum, the track is continuing to turn. It's not stopping. Gary and the survivors got out and spent the night hiding from the NVA. And of course, while they're doing this, the infantry are up on the road fighting. By this time, the infantry was able to radio back to LZ Hawk that they had been attacked. A couple of squads of infantry and a tank went out as a reactionary rescue force. I got on the tank simply because they may need somebody. We got to the area where they had been attacked, and by now the NVA had obviously heard the other tank coming, and it's just sporadic firing going on. We picked up, at the time, I believe 4 dead Marines. Put them on the engine cover of the tank, and yours truly's job was to make sure they didn't fall off. Yeah, and here I am, a 20-year-old, well, excuse me, at that time I was an old guy of 21. The only dead people I'd ever seen were in the local funeral home, laid out perfectly nice and all clean and everything. And so my job was to keep the bodies from falling off. And a bumpy road, as you well know, tanks haven't really got what you call great suspension. the bodies would tend to bounce toward the back end of the tank, and my job was to grab these guys and pull them back. We got up back to the LZ, what are believed to be 4 dead people. One of these is Gil Hernandez. The corpsman for the grunt unit came over to check these guys, as a good corpsman will do. Finds out that Hernandez is still alive. Slaps whatever he slaps on him they call in a medevac chopper. The medevac chopper takes Gil down to Charlie Med, which I believe is in Da Nang or Dong Hao, I forget which. He's rushed into triage. The surgeon in triage takes a look at him and says, no, this man is dead. Take him next door to Graves Registration. Oh, okay. They take him over. The guy in Graves Registration, who is probably a PFC or Lance Corporal, begins washing Gil's body off because he's covered with dirt, blood, you name it. And either, as Gil tells the story, either I breathed or I twitched or did something so this guy knew I was alive. Runs back in, tells the surgeon, you're a private. What do you know what dead is? I'm a surgeon. I know what dead is. That man's dead. Well, he moved. Well, just involuntary muscle spasm. Dead people do that. So the guy goes back in, and Gil says, I remember apparently I blinked and breathed on him. The guy went back and he said, thank God. The guy went back and grabbed the surgeon, drags him in to Graves Registration and says, this man is alive. And the surgeon checked him and said, my God, he's alive. They took him into triage, and 4 hours later, he's in what would normally be called recovery. They opened him up from just below his collarbone down to his pelvic bone and removed fragments of bullets, you name it. I've talked to Gil. They probably took at least a pound of something out of him. He was put on a plane the next day, flown to Okinawa, or Japan, I forget which, where he became infected. They opened him up again, cleaned him all out, sewed him back up, and he spent the next 3 years in hospitals. So that's why April the 25th is kind of special to me, because I met Gil Hernandez in the San Diego reunion. Yeah. So anyway, moving on. April, things were pretty quiet up there until May the 19th. Actually, May the 18th, let's step back a little. May the 18th, there was some kind of, wasn't really an operation, but it was they were running a push west and south, several miles west and south of Khe Sanh. Charlie 3-1, the Lonely Bull, the tank I'm the driver on. We're out there with X number of grunts as the blocking force. And we basically spend our day drinking coffee. Those of us who smoked cigarettes, drank our water, ate our sea rations. And a couple of miles away, you could hear bang, 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 bang. Small little firefight, but nothing ever came towards us. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, and this is up in the mountains, so it starts getting dark earlier. They two 6-bys showed up, picked up the infantry, take them back to where they were taking them for the night. We get orders to go to Bridge 35, which is just outside of Khe Sanh. Khe Sanh sat about 2 miles off of Highway 9 on a plateau. And the Marine Corps basically made a road from Highway 9 to Khe Sanh. And just about a quarter of a mile from Highway 9, there was a small river. We'd call it a stream, but there was a river for them. And there was a bridge there, so they always had to have infantry there to guard the bridge, because if it got destroyed, it was almost impossible to get the case on. So we get orders to go there. As my understanding was, the captain at Quezon who was giving us directions, because we were in the middle of effing nowhere. He says, from where your location, turn around, go so many clicks, and you'll come to the road, Highway 9, and make a left. Go down until you see a road running off to the left, a small dirt 2-track. Take that, a quarter of a mile down there, you'll find Bridge 35. You're spending the night there. Okay, no problem. The only problem, of course, is the directions are exactly backwards. He has given us directions from Quezon. Instead of going left, we need to go right. So I get up the road, I turn left. It's a typical superhighway for Vietnam at the time, a dirt road. After a mile or so, it's now a 2-track. Another couple of miles, it's just ruts in the grass. And about a mile later, it's just grass. There's nothing. So Daryl Clock is on the radio calling Quezon, explaining the situation in less than polite terms. Okay, he's yelling and screaming and swearing. In the meantime, I start to back the tank up, turn it around, because we know we've gone the wrong way. Now, you have to picture this. We are probably miles from anything other than grass and trees. I ran over a 20-foot piece of barbed wire. It caught in the track, lifted the track off the drive sprocket on the left side of the tank, and now we're stuck because we can't go anywhere because we've thrown our track. So I take my M16 and my 3 magazines, and I'm security over here. We had a motor transport driver riding with us for the day just for the fun of it. We gave him the grease gun and the 3 magazines, and he's security over here.
And for those who don't know what a grease gun is,
It's a 45 caliber submachine gun made out of machined parts. Every part for every grease gun fits every other grease gun ever made.
Made by General Motors.
Yeah. And Ford, I think Chrysler made a few.
Yeah,
But anyway,
made a few too.
so here we are, security. I've got about 40 rounds. This guy's got about 35 rounds, and we're security for a vehicle that's worth multi-millions even back then. And the other 3 guys, Daryl, a gentleman by the name of Tony Sims, who was the loader, and Tom Freeman, the gunner, are out working their backsides off, because you got to take the track apart so you can put it back on the drive sprocket and then put it back together so we can leave. In the meantime, Daryl's on the radio screaming his lungs out. And even Daryl will tell you, he said, I lost it. You know, it's getting dark. It's dusk now. And we know we're at least 4 or 5 miles away from where we gotta be. And Daryl's screaming on the radio, and I'm 30 feet away or whatever, and I can hear him clear as a bell. And this captain is telling him, oh, don't worry, take it easy, take it easy. Let me backtrack just a little. In the radio parlance for military, an actual is usually a lieutenant of some sort, who runs in a great while a captain, depending on the unit. In tank parlance, the actual is nothing more than the tank commander. So when Daryl would call on the radio, he announced himself as Charlie 3-1 actual. Now, if you're an infantry commander, to me, that means that you're talking to some second lieutenant. So we hear this captain going, calm down, Lieutenant, calm down, we'll get you some help, calm down. And of course, Daryl is so excited and he's lost it, he doesn't hear the lieutenant part. He just hears this guy tell him to calm down, bullshit. You get my people out of here, blah, 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 blah. Well, about the time we got the track fixed and got the tank turned around, a 6x with about 12 grunts show up. We follow them back to Bridge 35 in the dark. The next morning, 7:30, we're all kind of sitting there drinking our sea ration coffee, waiting for the road sweep to come by so we can go back to LZ Hawk, our home. All of a sudden, there's bees flying over our heads. And one or two. Then pretty soon it's a constant stream of bullets going over our head. The sweep crew coming out with the convoy that morning triggered an ambush. And the firefight is on. I think we lost two Bravo tanks were destroyed that day. We killed 350 NVA soldiers. And I had several grunts. I don't know how many grunts were killed. And that's where the world famous hand grenade story comes in. Yours truly, who had now been in country 2.5 months, and I'm just saltier than than a dog. I'm driving into this battle. From the chest up, I'm exposed. Well, we ran into a problem. One of the bunkers the grunts could not destroy because the design of the bunker made it almost impossible. They couldn't throw hand grenades in because there's a wall just inside the door. So they'd throw their hand grenade in, it just bounced back out. They tried to shoot in, it just absorbed by the trees that this bunker is made out of. Well, while this is going on, there was a little bit of a lull in the fighting for some reason, probably because everybody ran out of bullets at the same time or something. An NVA soldier comes out of this bunker. Now I'm left-handed, so I demonstrate left-handed, but he was right-handed. And as I remember, he looked like he was maybe 15 years old, which means he was probably 30, and he had on the brand new clean NVA uniform. He comes out of the bunker, pulls the string on the Chi-Com grenade, and throws it at the tank, Charlie 3-1. I see it go up and I go, oh, it's going right over the top of the tank, nothing to worry about. Well, my depth perception apparently was off that day. Hit Darrell Clock, who was standing up in the tank commander's cupola with the hatch open, hit him in the chest. Bounced off, rolled down the slope plate of the gun and landed in my lap. And it's smoking. And I hear this rattle, plop in my lap. I look down, and I can remember to this day saying right out loud to myself, you don't even have time to bend over and kiss your ass goodbye. And then I realized it didn't go off. I picked it up, I throw it out. Drop the seat, close the hatch. You don't gotta tell me twice. And at that point, the grunts still can't destroy this bunker because this guy jumps back in. They're shooting at him like crazy. And I called Darrell, I says, see if Ralston will let us use the 90. And so he called for permission to use the 90. He had to actually call to Quezon to somebody inside the base to get permission, and they denied it. If you use the 90, there might be so much damage to the area you're going to kill infantry. You're going to kill Marines. So, and they can't. Just God knows how many guys are in this bunker. So I told Darrell, I says, let's just drive over the top of it. Okay, we got permission to do this. I drove the tank onto the bunker, did a neutral steer, and as the bunker started to collapse, I drove off. Then the grunts rushed up behind us, threw about God knows how many hand grenades in, and blew the thing to nothing. And down the road we went, continued the fighting. At the time, I estimated the battle maybe 3 hours. The records indicate that it lasted 7.5. All from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And like I said, we lost several tanks. The battle actually ended when everybody just pulled back, and the jets came in with napalm, and they simply napalmed everybody. And henceforth the term crispy critters. That means, sounds nasty, and it is, but you didn't care. You were alive, they were dead, that's the good part. Anyway, so That's the famous hand grenade story. And to be honest with you, a lot of the other stuff that happened was boring. I stuck in July or August of '68, we had picked up some dead guys just outside of Kamlo, I think. Apparently this staff sergeant was driving a Mighty Mite, the AMC mini Jeep, when they ran over either a grenade or something, but took the flywheel, drove it through the thing and decapitated him. Well, they threw his body up on my fender, because I'm driving. We got grunts on this fender, decapitated on this, and we're driving down the road, firing across the Quaviet River for where we're getting incoming from. Well, obviously if I'm moving this way and they're firing this way, the turret keeps turning. Well, we did that for a little, couldn't tell you how long. When I got hit in the head with a Prick 25 radio, PRC 25, I look up, there's like 6 grunts in 3 feet of front fender. The turret was pushing them right off the front of the tank. And we hadn't noticed it. And about that time I told the gunner to quit traversing because you're gonna kill the grunts. And you're killing me because I got hit in the head with the radio. About that time we hit a bump. In comes the headless horseman. Reflex. This much of my hand is down the guy's neck. We stop, I take the body off my arm, I put him back on the fender, on my trousers, and away we go. And honestly, to be honest with you, in between that date in May, that date in August, and probably December, there's no memories. I mean, you sit down and tell me what happened and I'll go, oh yeah. But independent recollection doesn't exist.
So there's a reason for that.
Oh, I know there. Over the years I've learned. And to be honest with you, that's part of the reason I'm sitting here today.
That's right.
Because as crass and crude as it sounds, this is therapy for me. To be able to sit here and talk to somebody, in your case, who was there, understands. It makes it all right. It doesn't get rid of it, it just makes it all right. And so that's it. Anyway, I rotated back in March '69, went to Fort Meade, went to Camp Lejeune, was there about 6 months, took a voluntary transfer to Fort Meade, Maryland, an Army base just north of D.C., and spent the last 2 months there at the Marine Barracks, NSA. Got out of the Marine Corps, and pretty much all that stuff was ancient history. I don't deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. People ask me if I was in the service. My answer usually was yeah, and that was the end of it. But, you know, you had to ask me which branch of the service you were in before I'd tell you. Yeah, what'd you do? Oh, I was a tanker. Oh, you know, the old, it's like talking to a teenager, you know?
And everybody knows that there were no tanks in Vietnam.
Absolutely right, absolutely right. So yeah, so for probably 25 years, or at least, if not 30 years, up until 1988. So from 71 till 88, what's that, 27 years. If you talk to me about the military, it's like talking to your teenage son about anything. You got monosyllabic answers.
Yeah. You know, we need to have answers. We need to have stories. We need to understand, because a lot of people have some opinions, such as were no tanks in Vietnam, such as were great atrocities committed by Americans. They have a lot of lies.
Oh yeah,
and
unfortunately, a lot of those are perpetrated by gentlemen like Oliver Stone.
Yeah, you know, it's like on that. Like I told the last interview, I'll never forget the day that my son came home and told me they were studying Vietnam in high school, and the teacher told him in history book that was the first war the American military lost. And so I told him, the book's a liar, your teacher doesn't know, and if he wants to know,
I'll be glad to come in and tell him.
I'll be glad to explain it and bring a few people with me. Because, you know, our mission, I keep saying this, and, you know, we were young and dumb and proud Marines. But that last part, at least we got older.
Yeah.
We're still proud Marines.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
To death do us part, then we become dead Marines.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we recognize and we understand that now our mission was to dissuade the North Vietnamese communists from infiltrating and attacking the Republic of Vietnam. And to that end, we were successful, except one time. And General Yap, we found out that he was facing a force far greater than the French Foreign Legion at the end of Benfou. So at the end of Tet, it told the story.
Mm-hmm.
We were successful, and he never tried it again.
Nope.
The thing that really irritates me, Vax, and I'm sure you, is when we look at the media coverage by the most trusted source in news, Walter Cronkite.
You said that with tongue in cheek, right?
Well, of course I do. As he stands on the streets of Hue and announces America's defeat,
I have lost my confidence in the military's ability to win this war.
That's right. As we were taking Hue City and every other major battle in country.
Yeah, and we were doing with about 1/3 the number of the people who were defending it.
That's right. We take a look at places like Khe Sanh, where we were outnumbered 5-1, but we held.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting sidelight to the battle there the day we got attacked outside of Khe Sanh. And I learned this probably in the early 90s. The day that battle took place in May, somebody involved in that battle, I'm assuming people on the Khe Sanh side of the fence, so to speak, not Charlie Company tanks that were with the infantry pushing, captured an NVA colonel, and which the colonel was more than willing to tell them what was going on because they were going to let him chew Hue. The plan was there were 2 or 3 regiments of NVA regulars in the Khe Sanh area, but they were spread out so they couldn't be detected. The plan was the 400 and some 500, whatever it was, NVA regulars that were in this ambush. They were to ambush the first convoy out of Khe Sanh, which had 2 or 3 tanks in it, just as they entered the wooded area prior to Bridge 35, which would put them about 1.5 to 2 miles from the main gate at Khe Sanh. They were to engage them in such a manner that the Marine Corps tactics would cause all these guys to come to the battle. When that happened, another 2 to 3 companies were going to cut the road between the gate at Khe Sanh and the convoy. The reactionary force obviously would come out of Khe Sanh, which would eliminate all the trained personnel other than cooks and whatever. Would be only things left, maybe 100, 200 people maybe, but none of them are infantry. At that time, when they came out the gate, then these people were going to encircle them and cut them off. The NVA knew full well that down the road was LZ Hawk with at least 3, maybe 4 tanks and probably 2 companies of infantry. The plan was when those people came to the rescue, there was a section about halfway between LZ Hawk and Khe Sanh that was nothing more than 2 or 3 miles of switchback. Literally, you know, your front end could just go around the corner and you could still see the back end. So they were going to attack, another company or two was going to attack the reactionary force coming out of LZ Hawk. Now you've got nobody to rescue Quezon, other than airplanes coming from Da Nang or wherever, which is going to take them umpteen minutes to get there. At that point, the whole regiment that's left attacks Quezon and wipes it out. When the road sweep prematurely triggered the ambush, they weren't supposed to trigger the ambush for at least another half hour, if not an hour. When that happened, they didn't know that, as far as I know, they did not know that our tank was sitting at Bridge 3-5. So we see all this, hear this going on. Immediately call back to LZ Hawk. LZ Hawk calls Quezon. This is what's going on. Quezon says, get your butts down there. So 2 companies of grunts and God knows how many trucks and 2 tanks, highball it, get through the cutbacks before the NVA can get there. Get online, we do our sweepy deepy thing, and we kill hundreds. Well, when this is going, obviously the reactionary force turns out not to come out. They came out and got online, and the guys that were in the convoy fall back, and there's the big pitched battle that day. So that was General whatever his name's battle plan, but it's like, as you're well aware, the best laid plans,
Right.
as soon as you throw the switch, are no longer any good.
First shot, there goes the plant.
Yep. So anyway, that's what happened. That's what was supposed to happen that day, as opposed to what actually did
I
happen.
remember building right up to that in the final siege, there was a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, we had a platoon from Bravo Company with Lieutenant Heim,
Hines.
Sergeant Serta.
Yep.
Let's see, who else? Yeah, let me think. What's Cameron Deese? Fred Kellogg.
Mm-hmm.
That got hit, and they almost, I mean, there wasn't
Oh
a
yeah.
Marine
Well,
that
Fred lost his tank. He
yeah,
destroyed
there
his
wasn't a
tank.
there wasn't a tank that came out of that ambush.
Yeah.
And Fred was medevaced.
Yep.
I think that's where Serta's crew was shot up pretty bad with RPGs.
Mm-hmm. Why
And, he
I
went in and opened up and got those guys out. And in fact, he was awarded the Silver Star.
yeah. I couldn't tell you which tank it was. I don't know if it was Fred's or Serta's or somebody else. But when it was over with, we were going into Quezon to refuel and rearm. That tank was sitting along the side of the road.
It was gone.
And there was a hole like this big in the front of the slope plate. And there was a hole like this big out the back engine covers.
Yep.
And I found out later that RPG went in one end and right back out the other.
And you know, the thing is we just finished an interview earlier, same thing. And people take a look at tanks and say, well, here's these big iron monsters and you're safe. But you know, we know that
ain't true.
rocket-propelled grenades, aka
Yeah.
RPGs, will cut through them like a hot knife through butter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, number 1 was helicopter door gunners.
Yeah.
Number 2 was tankers.
Yeah.
The 2 highest percentage
Of injuries,
casualty
yeah.
rates
Yeah.
in the
Oh, yeah.
Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good for not being there.
No, yeah, we did all right, huh?
I mean, we weren't there.
Yeah,
Tanks weren't
as
there.
a side thing on how events affect more than the people who were there.
Yeah.
You remember I mentioned the fact that Jimmy Janes, the driver for Gary Hall, was killed
Right.
in April on the night that I was supposed to be driving. You ask my daughter, who's now 45 years old, who does she visit when sometimes? And she goes to the wall with me. She says, I go to Jimmy's. My daughter is convinced that her father's alive, which means she's alive, which means her sister's alive, because Jimmy Janes is dead.
Well,
And I've done my best to tell her. I said, look, Jimmy drove different than me. I knew Jimmy. He drove a whole lot different style, if you want. than I drove. I said, that particular night, being not as brave, yours truly probably would, maybe if I was unbuttoned, there'd be about this much of me sticking up.
Yeah.
Which means when the blast hit, I probably would have survived. You know, I might have even been buttoned up, you know. Or I might have driven a little bit faster or been driving a little bit slower. And
Well,
so, but who knows? But anyway,
drivers,
I guess that's how events involving people here take interbred people down here.
what was your rank when you served?
When I was in Vietnam, I was a PFC. When I got there, I left as a Lance Corporal.
And when you left, you're down to your last 30 days. And we all know that by that time you're salty, you're confident, and that's dangerous.
You're beyond salty, but you're also scared to death because you've got all those days left, and you know what can happen.
Yeah, most dangerous part. Can't get too cocky.
Oh no, I was fortunate enough, and I do not remember for the life of me, and amazingly, nobody else in 3rd Platoon Charlie Company, 3rd Tanks remembers this first lieutenant's name who relieved Dave Ralston when Dave Ralston's tour was up. We all remember him as a guy about 5'8", sandy blonde hair or brown, and he was a graduate of Annapolis, and that's it. But anyway, I had about 14 days left, and I went to the rear. He said, Vaxter, you get on the truck, you're going to the rear. And so I spent my last 14 days doing perimeter watch in bunkers at Quang Tree, which at that time was still a battalion rear. So there was like half a mile of barbed wire between me and anything. I read a lot of comic books and kept my ass down. And I filled sandbags, whatever they needed to do as long as inside the wire. Yours truly volunteered to do it.
Yeah.
And then I got my orders to go home, and I had to go I went to the barber shop, and I got my first high and tight in 13 months. And went to Okinawa, flew into Travis Air Force Base. 13 months to the day from the day I left.
And then from Travis, you probably went down to San Francisco International Airport?
Yep, paid a E3 from the Air Force, $2 a head, and he took 9 of us down in his Plymouth station wagon. Got a flight on PSA Airlines from San Francisco to LA because there were no direct flights until 6 o'clock in the evening from San Francisco to Phoenix, where my mother and my fiance were at. I got into Phoenix at 12:30 at night. I spent 9 hours in Los Angeles because they didn't have any planes that would fly.
You know, as a youngster who grew up in San Francisco and coming home in '69, I had to visit my parents. I had a rather unique experience as I walked off the jet lane. And I was just an enlisted Marine corporal, minding my own business. And I found some interesting things that happened at San Francisco Airport. Did you find that?
Oh yeah, when the Air Force Airman First Class, I think that'd be at E3, he dropped myself and another Marine off at the airport. This Marine was going, I think he went to Chicago. He was going east anyway. We got at the airport, we went inside. We're walking through the terminal, and there's all these people that because I didn't, I was a civilian until '67, so I knew they were hippies. Because everybody knew San Francisco and the hippies. And 2 of them came running up to us. And I remember the guy with the long, stringy, filthy, disgusting looking hair down below his shoulders. He spit at us. Either he was a bad shot or I was quicker than I thought because he didn't get us.
Yeah.
But the fellow who was with me, who had been in 0311 Infantry, when the guy got within range, he dropped him with one right hand right to the nose. And this guy just kind of crumpled and lay there. And his partner is screaming, "Oh, you've assaulted him, you baby killers, effing this." And we were called the traditional names for that period for military people. About that time, too, San Francisco's finest arrived and wanted to know what happened. I said, "Well, this guy here spit at us, and this guy here lunged, and my friend punched him out. We thought he was attacking us." "Oh, okay." They handcuffed the first guy, they handcuffed the second guy, and away they went. I went down to the ticket booth, I bought my ticket. I said, "I need a flight to Phoenix." The girl goes, "Well, nothing until 6 o'clock. I don't want to wait that long." She said, "Well, we can get you on PSA, flight leaving in 15 minutes. It's an hour or something to Los Angeles." He says, "Machine indicates there's a flight every hour to an hour and a half from Los Angeles to Phoenix." I'm out of here. Paid my $12.78 for my military standby ticket. Flew to LA. And like 7, 8, 9 hours later, I finally left LA.
Well, your experience was my experience. The only thing was, I was home, I thought.
Yeah.
But home had changed.
You were home where it was safe.
Yeah, home had changed. Having grown up. See, I didn't go in the Marine Corps till I dropped out of college to go in the Corps. And I did that in 1968, January 9th. And I saw that whole summer of love.
I beat you. I dropped out of college in '67 because I ran out of money.
Yeah, and I just wasn't going to sit by and watch it all happen anymore.
For some reason, the $200 I had in the bank in May of '67 just wouldn't pay for a semester in school.
Yeah.
Not at the 4-year university that had said I could go there and matriculate.
So then you went back and you did everything. You got out of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So you're out of the Marine Corps. What do you do next?
My first wife and I and my daughter, the one and only daughter at the time, we moved to Phoenix when I mustered out. Well, actually, I moved them out there earlier because I was testing for the Phoenix Police Department. Didn't get a high enough score. I got on the list, but I was so far down it was going to be. Anyway, so I got out and was fortunate enough to be totally stone drunk by the time I got to Phoenix from Washington, D.C. Found myself a job. Used the 37 days of leave I had coming to me to pay for that, to pay some bills and stuff. And then I got a job that, wasn't a great job, but it was an okay job. And then I got a second job. And then after about a year, 1973, so about 18 months after I got out, I got hired by the Glendale, Arizona Police Department. And worked there just about a year. And then the wonderful recession of the fall of 1973 took place. And Glendale, Arizona at that time was a bedroom community. I mean, like 90% bedroom. Had its quota of 7-Eleven stores and, movie theaters and stuff like that. But for all practical purposes, it was a bedroom community. And so they laid off a bunch of us. And I was fortunate enough to have a buddy in Battle Creek, Michigan, who worked at the Veterans Administration Hospital. And they were looking for people to become federal police officers at the hospital. Yours truly at the time was certified by the government to start as a government employee as a GS-9. So I filled out the application, sent it in along with my little certificates advising that. I did a phone interview with the guy who was going to be the chief of police. He says, "You're hired, you're my lieutenant. When can you get here?" "Oh, probably a week." "Okay." My wife and I sold the house, sold everything we owned that didn't fit in our van. By that time, my second daughter was born. This is January '74. She's a month old. We put her bassinet here, put a bed for my older daughter here, who was 3, right there. The rest of the van is full. And we left Phoenix for Battle Creek, Michigan. I got to Battle Creek and there's no job. The director of the hospital did not want separate police and fire. He didn't like the idea, so he sent the allocation back to the district headquarters, which at that time was Detroit, and said, I'm not doing this. Well, 3 months later, he was fired because Washington wanted it. Well, in the meantime, I get there, there's no job. Ended up on welfare for a couple of months while I finally found a job, and I got hired by the Springfield, Michigan Police Department, which is a suburb of Battle Creek. And I worked there until I retired.
Outstanding. Well, you know, when you take the statistics, and when we compare those who served this country honorably during the Vietnam War, and compare it to those who did not serve this country during the Vietnam War, the success stories of those who served far outweigh the successes by our counterparts. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the illusion of the drug-crazy veteran,
drunken, brawling,
yeah,
baby killer.
Yes. You know, it simply isn't. It doesn't fit the reality.
No.
It does not.
It's like anything else. There's a percentage of
Sure.
people that fit that stereotypical thing, but you're right. For the most part, has been my observation over the last 40 plus years that that's such a small minority.
Yeah,
They're not even worth talking about.
I mean, there are those guys who self-anesthetized and just couldn't get past it.
And probably still are.
Yeah, and
some of them anyway. They aren't dead.
My heart goes out to them.
Yeah,
it goes out to them. The brothers are you know, but most Vietnam era veterans have been quite successful and rose to great prominence within numerous organizations.
Oh yeah.
And raised their families and have done well. Yeah. So, you know, and our story will be told.
And we'll see to it.